If you are late to a meeting or like a spoken language classroom, your first instinct is probably to turn into a ninja.
Oh, absolutely.
You sneak in the back door, you avoid eye contact at all costs, you step really softly, you just sort of slide into your seat silently.
Right, right. Which is a perfectly logical survival strategy. I mean, in an auditory world, we are completely conditioned to believe that silence equals respect.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, blending into the background is just the most polite way to handle a disruption.
But when you step into the world of American Sign Language, pulling that ninja routine isn't just considered rude. It completely shatters the ecosystem of the room.
It really does. It's a total shock to the system for beginners.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled to have you with us. Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to explore how deaf culture approaches to incredibly personal, really social dynamics that hearing people often just take entirely for granted.
Yeah, and those are first how you physically exist and move within a shared space, and second, how your personal identity is forged, rule-governed, and communicated through something called name signs.
Right, which we have a lot to say about later.
Oh, definitely. And for you, the listener, whether you are actively learning ASL or just deeply curious about how different communities operate, this is a really fascinating paradigm shift.
It really is.
Because learning a language like ASL isn't simply a matter of memorizing vocabulary flashcards or grammar rules. It requires you to adopt a completely different cultural logic.
Yes.
You are entering a visual landscape, which means the physics of how human beings interact must be entirely recalibrated.
So I want you to think about the unspoken rules of the spaces you inhabit every day. Your office, your living room, maybe your favorite coffee shop. Get ready to view the etiquette of those everyday spaces through a profoundly different lens.
Because in our research for today's deep dive, the very first concept we encounter immediately highlights the stark contrast between a hearing environment and a visual one.
Right, the protocol for minimizing interruptions.
Exactly. So let's look at that late arrival scenario again. In an ASL environment, the physical layout is usually a semicircle.
Which makes sense, yeah.
Right, because everyone needs a clear, unobstructed sightline to everyone else. Those sightlines are the literal channels of communication. So if you arrive late to that environment, you absolutely do not sneak to your seat.
The protocol is actually remarkably specific. Our sources say you are supposed to wait at the door, or stand just outside that semicircle of desks, and wait for an appropriate break in the teacher's presentation.
Yep.
And then you step forward, get the teacher's attention, briefly apologize, explain exactly why you are late, and only then do you get permission to take your seat.
Which completely flips the script on what constitutes a disruption, doesn't it?
Well, see, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Because reading through this cultural norm, my initial instinct was absolute dread. I mean, doesn't stopping the entire room to announce your excuse create vastly more of an interruption than just slipping into an empty chair unnoticed?
That's such a common reaction.
Right. You are literally halting the flow of information.
It feels completely counterintuitive until you analyze the mechanics of a shared visual field. Because think about it, in an auditory environment, a sudden loud noise breaks our focus.
Sure.
But in a visual environment, a sudden unexplained movement breaks focus. If someone just suddenly appears in your peripheral vision and starts navigating a maze of desks, that visual anomaly is highly distracting. It hijacks the room's attention.
Oh, because everyone's primary mode of receiving information is locked onto that shared visual field.
Precisely. The core cultural value at play here is mutual awareness. Keeping each other informed is absolutely essential.
Oh, yeah, that makes so much more sense.
Right. If you just appear out of nowhere, or conversely, if you just stand up and walk out of a room without a single word, you create a mystery.
A visual mystery.
Exactly. People instantly wonder, where is she going? Did I miss an announcement? Is there some kind of emergency out in the hallway?
Oh, wow. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, so by waiting for a pause, getting attention, and briefly explaining your movement, you are actually closing the loop of information. You resolve the mystery so everyone can comfortably return their visual focus to the conversation.
The mystery of the movement is more distracting than the explanation of the movement. That is a brilliant way to frame it.
It really changes how you view a room.
Totally. And to give you a concrete picture of how this works, let's imagine a scenario with a student. We'll call her Suzanne.
Okay, Suzanne.
So Suzanne needs to leave early. She doesn't just quietly pack her bag and goes to the room.
Definitely not.
She waits for a natural pause in the signing. She gets the instructor's attention, and she uses just one or two signs, maybe the sign for an appointment or feeling ill. to explain her departure. It's incredibly efficient, but it maintains the integrity of the group's shared awareness.
It's an acknowledgement that your presence and your absence matter to the collective. I mean, you aren't operating in a vacuum.
But I love that this cultural framework also accounts for the reality that life doesn't always go according to plan.
Oh, absolutely. There are contingencies.
Right, there's a plan B built right into the etiquette. Like, what if you arrive late and you are standing outside that semicircle, but the teacher is deep in an intense conversation with another student or working really closely with a small group?
Yeah, what then?
You obviously can't just stand there forever.
No, because standing there indefinitely, just like hovering outside the group's periphery, eventually becomes its own visual distraction. You literally become the elephant in the room.
Right. So in that specific case, where you truly cannot get attention without causing a massive derailment, the protocol shifts. You just go ahead and take a seat.
Yeah.
And conversely, if you have to leave early and the teacher's completely occupied, you don't just leave a void in the room.
You quietly pull aside a fellow classmate.
Exactly. You leave your explanation with them, and they act as your messenger to deliver that information to the teacher later.
Notice how, even in the backup plan, the loop of information is eventually closed. The community takes responsibility for maintaining that web of collective awareness. It's a profound level of social respect.
Which feels incredibly grounding. And this hyper-awareness of physical space and how carefully we track who is moving through it logically extends to how we identify the actual individuals within that space.
Yes, it absolutely does.
Which brings us to the second major focus of our deep dive, name signs.
This is where we transition from the etiquette of the community to the ultimate marker of individual identity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The ground rules for name signs completely upended everything I thought I knew about how names function.
I'm not surprised it's a huge shift.
Because for anyone relying on spoken language, we use a person's name as an attention getter. You walk into a room and shout, "Hey, Sarah." But in deaf culture, a name sign is primarily used for referring to a person when they aren't looking or pointing them out to someone else. You do not use it to address the person directly to their face.
Which is wild for hearing people to grasp. It requires you to separate the concept of getting attention from the concept of identity.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Sure. So in ASL, if you want Sarah's attention, you use a visual or tactile signal. You wave your hand in her field of vision, or you offer a gentle tap on her shoulder.
Or tap the table, right?
Exactly. You might lightly tap the table so she feels the vibration. But once you have her eye contact, you don't then sign her name to her. She already knows who she is.
So you only use her name sign when you're talking about her to a third party. Like I was studying with Sarah yesterday.
Precisely. It is a community identifier.
And based on our sources, there are two fundamentally different categories for how these identifiers are created: descriptive and arbitrary. Let's break those down, starting with descriptive.
As the term suggests, a descriptive name sign is derived from a distinct physical or behavioral characteristic of the person. It's highly visual and easily observable.
The examples we found for this are incredibly charming.
Oh, they're great.
A descriptive sign might highlight that a person has deep dimples or a specific style of frizzy hair or big expressive eyes.
Or a behavioral quirk.
Right. It can capture a personality trait, like a specific sign for someone who has a booming laugh or is always smiling. It can even be a clever visual pun on a written surname.
Like the fish example.
Yes. If your last name is literally the word fish, your descriptive name sign might smoothly incorporate the ASL sign for a swimming fish.
What's vital to understand here is the global context. If you travel to deaf communities around the world, throughout Europe, Asia, South America, these highly visual descriptive name signs are the standard norm for adults.
Which makes perfect sense for a visual language.
It is the most organic way a visual language generates a noun for a person. But in the United States, there is a very different, very specific cultural pattern.
Yeah, this confused me at first. In the U.S., descriptive signs are definitely used, but mostly among children.
Right.
You might see young kids at a residential school using descriptive signs to identify each other or to identify a specific teacher by some quirky habit. But as those children grow into adulthood, those descriptive signs are almost always shed and replaced.
They transition to what the community calls arbitrary name signs. And well, while there is a modern growing trend of some deaf parents giving descriptive signs to their children right from birth, the historical and prevailing norm for adults in the American deaf community is the arbitrary system.
Now, the word arbitrary usually means random or without reason.
True.
But in this context, it simply means the sign has no intrinsic visual connection to the person's physical appearance or personality.
Right. It doesn't describe what they look like.
Instead, it is purely based on the initials of a person's written English name, usually the first name. But the language nerd in me has to clarify something crucial here.
Go.
Just because it relies on an initial does not mean you can just take your hand, form the letter of your first name, and wave it around however you want.
Far from it. Arbitrary name signs are governed by a remarkably strict phonological system.
Okay, wait, I had to stop you there because the word phonological has the root word phono, which implies sound.
Yes, it does.
So how can a purely visual, silent language have a phonological system?
It's a really great clarification. In linguistics, phonology refers to the foundational, meaningless building blocks that combine to create meaningful words.
Okay.
In spoken English, those building blocks are sound units, so consonants and vowels. But in ASL, the phonology consists of visual building blocks.
Oh, I see.
The specific hand shape, the exact location on the body, the movement of the hand, and the orientation of the palm.
Ah, okay. So an arbitrary name sign is like a mathematical combination of those specific visual building blocks.
Exactly. And there are strict rules about which combinations are culturally acceptable and which are just, frankly, gibberish.
Let's look at the letter L as an example from the curriculum. If your name is Lauren or Liam, your name sign will utilize the L hand shape. But how that hand shape interacts with your body defines the specific name sign.
Right.
One acceptable variation is taking the L hand shape, using the tip of the thumb as the contact point, and tapping it in a dual location, say the left side of your upper chest, and then moving to tap the right side.
That is one distinct, legally formed, arbitrary sign. Now change just a few of those parameters. Keep the L hand shape, but this time the contact point is the palm side of your hand. The location is a single spot in the center of the chest, and the movement is a double tap.
That is an entirely different but equally valid name sign.
Exactly.
Or, and this variation is fascinating because it doesn't touch the body at all, you hold that L hand shape in the neutral space right in front of your chest, and the movement is just a gentle, repetitive shake.
Yep, that's another one.
Every tiny shift in those parameters creates a new identifier. Some families will even map these rules onto their entire household to create a sort of visual surname.
I love when families do that.
It's so cool. The parents and kids might all use the first letter of their own respective names, but they will all execute the sign at the exact same location on the chin or the chest, creating this beautiful family resemblance in sign.
It's a deeply sophisticated system,
Yeah.
but we really have to ask the historical question here. If the rest of the global deaf community naturally defaults to descriptive visual signs, why did the United States adopt this strict, initial-based, arbitrary system?
Yes. How did that happen?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the historical records, heavily researched by scholars like Samuel D. Sapala, trace this anomaly back to the early 19th century.
Wow, that far back.
Yeah. It points directly to the foundation of deaf education in America, specifically the influence of Laurent Clerc. Clerc was a brilliant deaf Frenchman who was brought over to co-found the very first permanent school for the deaf in the United States, located in Hartford, Connecticut.
So he brings French Sign Language over, and it begins to mingle with the localized indigenous sign languages already being used by communities in the U.S., which eventually births modern ASL.
That's the linguistic melting pot, yes. But the educational strategy is the key. In France, during that era, educators in deaf schools were heavily utilizing initialized signs.
Meaning using the first letter of a word.
Right. It is a top-down educational tool designed to help deaf students bridge the gap to written, spoken language. They would take a standard sign and force it to be performed with the initial letter of the translated French word.
So it was essentially a pedagogical crutch.
Precisely. And Sapala surmises that Clerc and other early educators brought this practice of initialization into the American classrooms. Teachers likely assign initialized name signs to the pupils as a way to manage the classroom and enforce English literacy.
That makes total sense for a school setting.
But here's where the magic of culture happens. What started as a top-down institutional rule was absorbed by the students. They lived together in these residential schools. They grew up together.
Yeah.
They took this initialized system, reclaimed it, refined the rules, and turned it into a deeply cherished marker of their own American deaf identity.
That is an incredible evolution. From an educational tool forced on them to a cultural badge of honor.
It really is.
But practically speaking, this reliance on initials creates a massive logistical bottleneck. I mean, if you have a finite number of acceptable hand shapes, locations, and movements, what happens when two people in the exact same social circle end up with the exact same name sign?
It happens all the time.
Or what happens when you graduate and move to a new city?
It totally guarantees collisions. And this is where we learn that name signs are not static.
Right.
They are not carved in stone on a birth certificate. They are fluid.
Yeah.
If two people in the same community share a sign, the rules dictate that one of those signs must be modified to distinguish them.
And there's a clear hierarchy to who has to make the change. It almost always falls to the person who is younger or the person who is the newcomer to the community. If you are a new ASL student or a hearing employee taking a job at a deaf organization and your arbitrary sign matches an established elder in that community, you are the one modifying your sign.
You are stepping into their space, so you adapt. You might modify it by adding a second hand shape to represent your last name. Or, in a fascinating blend of the two systems, you might attach a descriptive element to your arbitrary initial.
Oh, like what?
Like adding a sign that indicates you are the taller of the two.
Oh, that's really clever. The research also highlights that name signs frequently shift when a person enters a formal professional career. Like using a first initial name sign might feel too familiar for a doctor or a lawyer.
Definitely.
In those settings, it's considered more proper to spell out the last name entirely or shift the arbitrary sign to use the initial of the last name.
It's a way of mapping professional distance and formality directly onto the visual identifier.
To really drive this home, our research tracked a classic case study from the curriculum, often referred to as the Eugene saga.
Oh, I love this example.
It tracks the life of a man named Eugene and how his identifier shifted repeatedly over the decades. It's not just a quick change. It's a relentless evolution.
Let's trace that timeline. It's so illuminating.
So it starts with the name sign his parents gave him at birth. Just a few years later, he enters grade school, meets a kid with the exact same sign, and boom, his sign is modified to include a last initial.
The classic collision.
Right. Years later, he enrolls at Gallaudet University, which is a massive, vibrant deaf epicenter. The sheer volume of peers means his hometown sign likely clashes again, or perhaps the peer culture dictates a cooler, more streamlined variation.
They usually do.
Then he graduates, he enters the workforce. The case study literally tracks his name sign changing across 3 different professional jobs, adapting to the specific hierarchy and social makeup of each new office before settling into the sign he currently uses.
What Eugene's saga illustrates so beautifully is that a name sign is a living, breathing map of a person's life. It isn't just a label, it is a record of how you have navigated institutions, how you relate to your peers, and what role you play in the fabric of society at any given moment.
Which is incredibly profound. But all of this complexity brings us to the most critical, ethical question of our entire deep dive.
And we really need to emphasize this part.
Absolutely, because if a name sign is this deeply personal, rule-governed, evolving marker of community belonging, well, who actually holds the power to give them out?
This raises an important question indeed, and the cultural consensus offers a very explicit warning about this, especially given the current landscape.
Yeah.
Because as ASL has exploded in popularity, there has been a massive influx of hearing students taking community classes or watching tutorials online. And with that enthusiasm, a really concerning trend has surfaced: the rise of non-traditional or self-assigned name signs.
Yes, our sources point out a specific, extremely cringeworthy example of this. You'll see a beginner student combine the initial of their name with a descriptive feature or a hobby.
Oh.
Like they'll take the K hand shape for Kathy, and they'll aggressively strum it across their chest like a guitar to mean Kathy, who loves playing music.
While the student might think they are being highly creative, they are actually violating the established phonological and cultural rules. It's a Frankenstein mashup of the arbitrary and descriptive systems that just does not naturally exist in the traditional American system.
It is exactly like trying to give yourself a cool nickname in high school.
It really is.
We all knew that one kid who came back from summer break and said, "Hey guys, I'm wearing leather jackets now, so from now on I want everyone to call me T-Bone."
Oh, wow. Yes.
Never, ever works. It is intensely awkward, everyone rolls their eyes, and it completely misses the point of how social dynamics and nicknames actually operate. You do not get to choose your own
No,
nickname.
you don't.
Your peers bestow it upon you based on shared experiences, inside jokes, and earned affection.
That is a perfect analogy for the social dynamics at play here. The ethical takeaway, firmly supported by historical experts like Sipala, is uncompromising. You cannot assign yourself a name sign. Never.
Deaf kids can't do it.
Name signs are properly given to deaf people, and only after a person has been involved in the community on an ongoing basis. It is not a shiny souvenir you collect at the end of ASL 101.
Right.
It is a functional tool based on work or social relationships. It is based on meaning you are around the community so often that spelling out your English name letter by letter becomes cumbersome.
Yeah.
And most importantly, it is based on familiarity.
The prevailing wisdom states it perfectly. You will know the time is right when deaf people give you the name sign without you having to ask for it.
Exactly.
If you demand one or try to invent one for yourself, you are trying to bypass the hard work of earning trust and proving your commitment to the community.
It is ultimately a gift, an acknowledgement of your integration and acceptance.
So what does this all mean?
Good question.
We started today by talking about how learning a language is so much more than memorizing vocabulary. Whether we are analyzing the careful, closed-loop protocol for interrupting a shared physical space, or unpacking the complex, deeply ethical process of earning a name sign, the takeaway is crystal clear.
It's all about behavior.
Right. True fluency isn't about what you can do with your hands. It's about respecting the deep-seated, unspoken rules of the people you're communicating with. It's about recognizing that your presence impacts the collective, and your identity within that space must be earned through mutual respect.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, think about the lessons this holds for how we all communicate today. In deaf culture, there is a profound structured effort to close the loop of information, to make sure no one is left guessing why someone entered or left a space.
Yeah.
Now look at our modern, fragmented digital workspaces. We constantly ghost Slack channels, drop off Zoom calls without warning, and just leave our digital presence ambiguous.
I am definitely guilty of that.
We all are. But imagine how much anxiety and miscommunication we could eliminate if we applied that same level of care and mutual awareness to our own digital environments, ensuring we never leave our communities in the dark.
What a brilliant way to look at it. The mechanics of a visual language offering a masterclass in modern communication.
And I think it also invites a lot of personal reflection.
Oh.
Yeah. I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today. If a name sign acts as a living record of your integration into a community, adapting as you grow and change environments, look back at the distinct chapters of your own life. How many times would your name sign have had to change to reflect who you were in those moments and who you had become to the people around you?
Wow, that is such a profound thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you move through your own spaces today, your offices, your classrooms, your group chats, pay attention to those unspoken rules of presence. Keep learning, keep questioning the world around you, and we will catch you next time.